Hello, this interview is one in a series of interviews that the Special Collections section of the State Archives of North Carolina is conducting with the American Indian Heritage Commission to record the lived experience of indigenous communities in North Carolina. These oral histories will be part of an archive series and will be made available to the public. Today is Monday, June 26, 2023. It is 11:02 in the morning, and this is an interview with, if you can give us your full name, please.
Juanita Chance Caldwell.
Okay, and can you spell that for me?
JUANITACHANCECALDWELL.
I appreciate it. Thank you. This interview is being conducted for the American Indian Heritage Commission Oral History Project. The interviewer is John Horan. If you could start.
My name is Coharie Bird. I'm the director of the North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission.
All right.
And I'm Quinn Godwin, Associate Director of the Commission.
I appreciate that. We've got a bunch of others here, and I won't list them all, but we have a few here at the house where we're doing this interview, and it is a video interview as well as an audio interview. With all that being said, the first question is, can you give me your birthday and place of birth?
I was born in Harnett County at home. My birth date is November the 28th, 1944. I was born on Thanksgiving as a turkey.
All right. Well, that's great. And I think with that, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I am 78 years old, very proud of my age. Has not always been an easy life. Growing up, there was 7 girls, 3 boys. Mom and Dad worked very hard on the farm. My dad said that if the farm made it, one day he would like to be a house mover, and that dream came true. After that, he said that he would like to, before he left this earth, he would like to have 10 farms, one for each of his children, which he did. He had 13. And we've often said if Dad would have been an educated man, I wonder what he would have become. But he could outfigure you in his head and you with a piece of paper. I have a son by my first marriage. His name is John Chris Chance. He lives in California, and he has a wife, Jen, and a beautiful little granddaughter by the name of Gemma. And I have a stepdaughter, Patricia Haynes, and she lives in Greensboro, North Carolina. I have a stepdaughter, Madison. She has 3 children, and her husband is a real estate person. She stays at home with the 3 children because she has 2 in diapers, so you can imagine that. I lived in Harnett County until I was 13, 14, went to Maple Grove School. We had teachers that came out of Sampson County and Pembroke to teach. We had one teacher that lived with us, Miss Nancy Ann Locklear, and her birthday was the same day as mine. And she lived with us, and on Friday she would go home. On Sunday she would come back. She taught in a 1-room schoolhouse. She had all 8 classes there, first through 8th grade, because we didn't have a kindergartner. She had 3 first graders. That was myself, my cousin, and a young man that later on died of cancer. She never had any discipline problems. It was one of those things where she walked in and the world was quiet, you know. We didn't see problems like we do nowadays in school. Miss Nancy Ann was the type of teacher that the 3 of us, she would say, you can read until you miss a word, and then you had to sit down. The next day, you had to know that word and know what it meant, and know how to spell it, and then you could continue reading. And that's how we did reading. I don't know how we ever learned science, history, but we did. I think she just grouped it into math and reading, and that was it. Miss Nancy Ann was, she was a loving person, but she was stern. She believed in discipline. And I can remember the only time I ever got in trouble was she had told all three of us at our little table that we sat at, nobody else sat with us, she told us not to talk. We continued to talk. And she came around with the ruler. And I had no idea what she was going to do with the ruler. And I said, Well, she said, I want you to stick out your hand. You put out your hand. She gave you 3 hard licks in your hand. You didn't talk anymore after that, And so when I went home that evening, at the dinner table, she told Mom and Daddy that she wanted me to tell them what happened to me today. And I couldn't remember. I had amnesia. I just couldn't remember. And she said, you know what happened at your table. So I had to tell Mom and Daddy what happened. And of course, Daddy finished it, because if you got punished at school, you got punished at home. And it wasn't sitting in a corner, And Daddy was sort of a strict disciplinarian, but he didn't have to do it very often. Daddy was he was not a tall man. He made up his tallness in voice and the way he talked. Mama was sort of the one that would pop, pop, pop. But Daddy was the one you didn't want to pop, pop, pop. And I can remember probably the worst spanking I ever got from him was I was left-handed, and he did not like a left-handed child. My mother was left-handed, and he said he did not want any left-handed children. So when we would sit at the table, or I would sit down to read with Daddy in front of the fireplace, he would make me trace the words with my right hand. So I would do everything. I still do everything left-handed except right. And I threw a rock through a big window at the house. And at that time, Mom and Dad couldn't afford a window, Well, my sister Dottie and I, we were just 2 years apart, and we played all the time. And I'd lie on Dottie all the time. I guess that's why I don't like a liar now, because I did. I would lie on Dottie. So the rock was sailing through the front of the house, through that window, and I said, oh, look. I said, Daddy, Dottie did it. And Dottie said, no, I didn't, Daddy. She said, Neat did it. She said, Neat was the one that threw that rock. I stood down that I did not do it. My daddy finally said, Juanita, I saw you do it. I still lied. I said, no, you didn't. Not me. Well, when he got through with me, I did it, And that was the way my dad was. He was just a hard disciplinarian. I've always said that the kids that came after us, there was 4 girls. And then my brother was born, and that's what they really wanted, I think, was a son. My dad wanted a son so bad. Well, from Gene on down, it seemed like life was a lot easier for them than it was for us, because they didn't have to go. They went to the cotton field, and they went to the tobacco field, but not like we did. And we just always said their life was easier than ours. They got cars, we didn't. Life was just different, And I think sometimes we resented it, but that was just the way life was. Growing up, I think it was like everybody else's. I never knew that we were really poor, because we always had food. We always had clothing. Mama made a lot of our clothing and stuff. But that's just the way it was. But I do remember at Christmas time when hog killing. You men, I bet, don't know about that. They would have a day in the winter, around November probably, when they would kill hogs. And several families would get together. And they would kill the hogs. And Mom and the ladies would make the lard and everything that you cook with. And they even made the soap. I see some puzzled looks on some people's face. But anyway, they made the soap that we used, which was called lye soap. And Mama said that was the best soap in the world, because when she was growing up, they washed their complexion, the face in it and everything, and they had beautiful complexions. But I think you can find lye soap now, but not very often. But anyway, they would get together and they would all do this. They would cut up the meat. They would hang the hams in the smokehouse. We had a smokehouse. They would hang the sausage in the smokehouse. Sometimes the sausage would be in casings. Sometimes it would be patty, but that's how they did the meat. And I remember people that did not have at Christmas time. I can remember Mom and Daddy taking a basket, just a wooden basket. They'd fill it with sweet potatoes, corn, potatoes out of the garden, like Irish potatoes, meats. They would take meat to them. And they would take this to families that didn't have anything for Christmas. And nowadays, if I was to tell that person, my mom and dad, I remember when they took meats and stuff to your family, they would probably be denied. But I remember when my dad died, a lady came up to us at the cemetery, and she said, "Girls, you don't know this." She said, "But one time your dad came to our house," and she said, "I didn't have any oil to heat the house with." And she said, "I still owe him for the tank of oil," because she didn't have the money to pay him. And I don't think anybody said, we want the money or anything, because there was a lot of people that owed Daddy money when he died. A lot of people told us, a lot of people didn't. Coming along, I enjoyed school. I loved Maple Grove. It was a fun time. I think we learned a lot, but then there was a lot we missed. Like when I started to the school in High Point, I found out that algebra, knew nothing about algebra. Math was probably one of the hardest things I went through, geometry, because we just didn't have a background on it. But anyway, at the 8th grade, my sisters Shirley, Ruth, and Dottie went to ECI, and they rode 72 miles round trip every day to get to school. And our Uncle Joseph was a teacher there, and he drove the little van, and he went around and picked up everybody. And but when it came my time to go to high school, Daddy said no more. And he and my Uncle Jim had talked about it for a long time, and I think they had planned things for a long time. They filled out the applications for me to go to Dunn High School. They weren't correct. They got Tally, and Taylor, a lawyer, out of Fayetteville to fill out the papers, and they still were not correct. Well, a man came to Harnett County by the name of William F. Bagwell. He graduated from Emory in South Carolina. He was from South Carolina, and you talk about prejudiced. His family was. Now he wasn't. He taught at Shaney College. He worked with the American Friends Service Committee. I don't know if you ever heard about the American Friends Service Committee, but they work with a lot of people in like Youngsville, people that could not get into school. That's what he and Charles Davis was a black man. That's what they did. He came to Dunn, and he talked with Daddy and Uncle Jim, and he said that he would try to help. Well, in the meantime, I'm skipping something. The bus that took us to ECI every day was blown up. And it was on a New Year's Eve. And all of a sudden, it went up in smoke and everything. And there was a lot of speculation of who did it. And a lot of people nowadays take credit for who did it. But I think everybody in the Chance family and the Jones family knew who did it, And they arrested my Uncle Enoch, who was a Jones, for blowing up the bus. They worked really hard to get Daddy, but Uncle Enoch never told. He never told anything. And they finally brought him home. I think they had beat him, and he was just, when he got out of the police car, he just fell out, out of the car. They brought him to Daddy's house. And anyway, they were never tried. But Daddy always worried about that, because there was the KKK. A lot of people in Dunn were against us, but there were some good people that were for us, like the mayor of Dunn. I know that he said that we should be going to the school there. He had a I don't know the word I want to use. He had a motive for saying that, and it involved a young Indian girl. Okay, And I think that was his motive for saying that. And but anyway, the governor of North Carolina, what was his name? He was the can't remember what his name was. It was started with E. I remember that. He was from, I think he was from Morganton, North Carolina. That's the one thing I remember. And they said he drove a pink Cadillac. I can't remember what his name right now. It'll come to me. But he said that he felt like that we deserved to go to that school and we needed to go to that school. But he told Mr. Bagwell and Mr. Davis that he could not say that in public because it would ruin his political career. And we knew that. So he kept his mouth closed. And but anyway, Daddy and Uncle Jim met with Mr. Bagwell and Mr. Davis, and they went to Fayetteville to see Tally and Tater. I think they did it bono. I'm not sure. I never remember hearing any money, but Daddy and Uncle Jim didn't have any money. And I've heard people say, oh, my uncle pulled that money out of his pocket. Bull. The people around didn't have money in their pockets like that, And if they'd had money in their pockets, my dad would have been the first one to pull it out and show it. That's the kind of man he was. But anyway, they took it. They went to Supreme Court in was it Wilmington? Wilmington, okay, yeah. And this went on for about maybe a half a year or so. Anyway, in the meantime, Dad said that we couldn't give up, that we had to make sure that we went to that school, some way, somehow. So there was a protest. The morning that we all arrived up there, I have never seen so many policemen in all my life. There were policemen, forest rangers, around the whole school. You could not get through because they were shoulder. And at that time, I think there was 12 or 14 of us went there. It was about 2 or 3 days that we stayed there. Finally got across the line, and that's when they said they were taking us to court or to the jail. But Daddy and Uncle Jim were in the courthouse, and that's where they took us and set us on the back row. They let us go, and said they wanted us to promise not to go back. Well, during that time, I don't remember how many days it was, but I could go back and look at some paperwork and probably find out. But it was days that we were there, like maybe a week with everybody, and then there was just Jean, my cousin, and myself. And Huey Powell went, I think, a couple of days. He wasn't there very long. I never saw him, heard of him going in a classroom or anything. But Jean and I went into a classroom and actually sit down. They ignored us. The teachers they weren't rude, but we weren't there. The kids were so quiet because they weren't really sure what was going to happen. And I remember Mr. Coach Varney was the coach, and he was bald-headed, and he could wiggle his ears like a rabbit. And I remember Jean and I were in his classroom, and everybody was so quiet. And I looked up at him. Jean was sitting in front of me, and I was sitting behind her, and he was wiggling his ears like a rabbit. Well, I fell out laughing, and Jean laughed because we saw what he did. Never talked to him about it, but it was probably the funniest thing I've ever seen a man do is wiggle his ears like a rabbit. But anyway, we spent time in that classroom. We spent time in a lot of classrooms during that time. I think Jean and I were probably there about 2 weeks, maybe. And then Dad said, okay, you're not going to get in. They're not going to pass the paperwork and everything. So Mr. Bagwell and Mr. Davis found homes for us to go to during that time. I had 3 cousins, 3 boys that went to Greensboro and stayed with this man, and they went to school in Greensboro. 2 girls that went to Raleigh, and Huey Paul went to Raleigh. I know Helen and Henrietta stayed there for the whole time. I think Paul left. He didn't stay there the whole time. We had a girl by the name of Alice and her sister Lois that were in Greensboro. There was not that many that went off to stay in homes, but the homes we stayed in were wonderful. And I've always said that I felt bad for the kids that went and did not take advantage of that, because the Bagwells had no children, never had any children, and that was just, they were married and they just decided no children. But what they were bad about adopting kids or letting kids come into their home for whatever reason. And so Jean and I went there, and it was a culture shock. I mean, from the word go, sit down at the table, and she would always set the table like I had it set. 2 forks, and everything, full course. And they were so wonderful, though. They would, if you said anything wrong, they didn't tell you in an ugly way. They would say, don't say this, say this. They worked on language, food. I'd only had collards, turnips, things like that, potatoes, peas out of the garden. She had asparagus, broccoli, cauliflower, things I'd never heard of. And you were supposed to eat this stuff. But guess what? I learned to eat it and learned to love it. And she would cook a roast. And I do believe she just warmed it because it would have so much juice and blood coming out of it. I said, I cannot get this down, but I learned to love it. I love it. It's one of my favorite, things now. They were just good like that, and they worked on manners, everything, and they were the kind of people we had breakfast every morning with them, and it wasn't you grab your cereal and go eat it and leave. You sit down at the table. He would always read the Bible, first side of the Bible, and then we'd have breakfast, and it was always eggs, toast, you name it, juice, full course. And I got to where I hated eggs because it was just one of those things you had. But anyway, they were the kind of people that you could ask them anything. I remember being with them. I think we were in Philadelphia. I'm not sure. And I saw 2 men walking down the street, and they were holding hands. And I wanted to ask so bad, why were they doing that? Because I'd never seen that before. So that morning at breakfast, I said, I'm going to ask you something, and I think you're going to get mad. And Mr. Bagwell said, what are you going to ask me? He said, you can ask anything. And I said, I want to know why those 2 men were walking down the street, hugged up, holding hands. It was a lesson. He told us. Didn't call any punches, just like it was, That was the kind of people they were. And I learned so much from them. I saw other kids that went away and didn't learn anything. And that was sad, because the opportunity, I think the opportunity was there if they would have just made room for it. But a lot of the kids didn't want to change. They wanted the way it was. They came home every weekend. And that's just the way it was. We went. Church was very important to them, but it was a Quaker church. Now, have you ever been to a Quaker church? An experience. Now, they didn't do like the old timers, sit on men on one side and women on the other. They had singing, everything, but it was a beautiful church. And we went every Sunday. And in the evening, it was you take the teenagers for we might do something, and then it was playtime or whatever you wanted to do. But that was a must. That was a thing that you did. You didn't say that you didn't want to go. You just went. Skipping school? No. Only time I ever skipped, I got caught. But that was one of those things. Learned to... High Point High at that time had a theater, the Paramount Theater. I hope it's still there. I haven't been there in a long time. Beautiful theater, but the blacks couldn't go. And at that time, I met 2 girls that were getting ready to go into High Point. They would be the first 2 blacks there. And Brenda and her sister's name was Linda. But anyway, they would protest on Sunday afternoon, walk the picket line in front of the Paramount Theater. And one day, Brenda said to me, she said, "Don't you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd never done it before, game." And learned a lot of things there too, because I think they thought that I was a high yellow or they used to call them that, I guess, a light-skinned black. And that's what they thought I was. And you got called the same thing that the girls got called, Did that, and eventually the theater opened and everything. And I don't even know if we ever went to that theater after it opened or not, because the point was we wanted it open, I stayed with the Bagwells. I loved it. Daddy called, or somebody called the High Point High School and told Mr. Bagwell and the principal that we had to come home. And the judge had ruled that the schools had to be open and that we were coming home. I didn't want to come. I loved it there. I didn't like being in Dunn, and I just loved it there. Well, Daddy said I had to come, and so you pack up your clothes and you leave. The one thing I regret about coming home was that Mama and Daddy did not know, and I don't think anybody else thought about it, that we probably needed therapy. We did. We really did. Especially going into Dunn High School. And I'm not I used to not be a therapist person, but I am now. But I think it would have helped Jean and myself. Jean stayed, her parents came back here. She didn't, they moved back to High Point right away. And Jean always, I think she just went back to that old life of being, people thought she was white, so that was okay. I don't know how her life was, but I know she's not gung-ho about anything like this now. She's questioned my sister about her book. She wanted to proof the book before my sister had it printed. And Sheila said, "No, this is my book." And she called me, and I talked to her, and she said, "Did you tell Sheila what to say?" I said, "No." Sheila and I came to the agreement that that was her book. If she needed to know something or ask me something, she could. But as far as my words in that book, no, as far as writing it and everything. Well, I don't think that went over too well. We sent her the book. We sent our Aunt Myrtle the book. And I think she took Aunt Myrtle's book and read it, but she never said anything about the book. And I've never talked to her about the book since then. But anyway, coming to Dunn High School was a rude awakening. I thought it was rough when we were coming up. Nothing like I was prepared for when we went to Dunn High School. Like I was telling the story of walking in the auditorium and sitting on the back seat was a gentleman, I won't call his name, because they're all dead now. So there's no need to tell who he was, but he had taken his wife and his 3 children, and they had traveled. Every year they went to Broughton High School, they went to South Carolina, they went all kinds of places for them not to be in high school. And they were not known as Indians, they were known as whites when they went there and everything. And I walked in that morning not wanting to be there and wondering what was going to happen anyway. Walked in, and on the back row sat those 3 kids that I knew and had grown up with, and their boyfriends and girlfriends that were white. And they were white. They were pretending to be white. And I told somebody earlier, the kill instinct comes to you, and God, I hope you never have it. But it just was not right. But there they were. And, they went through that school the whole time, and nothing ever bothered them. Nothing ever bothered them. Because they weren't, people didn't know they were Indian and everything. You would go to a classroom and you knew you were an Indian, The name calling was bad, but I think being shunned was the worst part of it. You often wondered if you were good enough, which I didn't think I was. You wonder what they said. Nobody was ever your friend. The only 2 friends I had at Dunn High School, the time I was there, and I'm going to name them because they deserve to be named. One was Billy Wellens, who's a real estate person in this town now, is a prominent real estate person. He always asks about me if he's somewhere or another, and he'll ask my sisters or something, where am I? He was so nice to me. And he had a friend, his name was Jack Chew, and he was nice to me. And I don't know, Billy Wellens, maybe people didn't like him because his family had money. Jack liked to drink and party when he was with Billy, but that was okay, but they were nice to me. They had a hut out back where kids go smoke and do. They were the only ones that ever come up and said, would you like to go to the hut and see what it's like? I went with them. Everybody in there dancing, having a good time and everything. I don't think I ever went back, but at least they invited me. And they were always nice when I saw them in the hall. Another person that I met, and her grandfather owned the restaurant here in Dunn, and it was Johnson's Restaurant on 301. It was a nice restaurant. Been there many years, and her name was Gloria Barnes, and she wasn't. I think they tolerated her because of her money, and her parents' status and all that kind of stuff. But she had a birthday party. Only party I was ever invited to was at her house. And her mom, Miss Henrietta, and her dad were so nice. So nice. And you wouldn't believe how nice they were. Made you feel like you were human, and everything. And I will never forget them. Gloria is now passed. Her dad, I think, had a restaurant in Pembroke at one time, but they've all passed, and Billy's still here. I haven't seen him in years. Now, there was something here. Like I said, if I saw him on my driveway, I wouldn't pick him up because that's just the way I feel about them, because they were ugly and mean. I had never read a story. Silas Marner. Do you remember that story? Okay. Silas Marner was in the freshman English book. I had never heard it before, never read a story like that before. And I was in the English class, and Miss Irene Dixon was the English teacher. She was a beautiful lady, but as far as her personality, she was so good. She was heavy set, but she knew her English and everything. She said we were going to read Silas Marner. And anyway, we opened the books, and she started, and she was the kind of person that when you were in her class, you would pick up your book and you read. You would pick up your book and you would read, and then you stopped, and she'd get somebody else to read. And I thought, Lord, please don't let her call on me today, please. Well, she did. And I wasn't worried about reading. I was worried about the reaction. Sure enough, there was 3 big old boys in the back, just snickering and laughing and carrying on while I was reading. And you couldn't really concentrate on reading because of them. And she stood up, and she was about as wide as she was tall, really. She was a sweetheart. But anyway, she stood up and she said, "You'd better wipe that smile off your face, and I mean PDQ." Well, I had never heard of PDQ. So anyway, she stood up there, and you talking about getting quiet, it got quiet. Well, after class, Gloria Barnes was in that class, and I said, "Gloria," I said, "what did Miss Dixon mean by PDQ?" She said she says PDQ because she means pretty damn quick, and that's what she meant, And from then on, I had no problem in that class because she meant what she said, This lady introduced me to so many books. I'm trying to sit here right now and think of a lot of them. Silas Marner was the first one, and I always remember that one. But there was Charles Dickens. I never heard of those stories. And they were like glue. They would stick to you, you know. And she would go through and she would explain everything if you didn't understand it, you know, what it meant and everything. That was one class I loved. I had a history class that I loved. I've always loved history. And I had a coach for that one. And he was okay. But he liked to get over on you. And I had studied so hard. Mama got me up early in the morning so I could study because I had made up my mind I was going to make 100 on that test. Got in that class and sit down. So proud of myself, I just knew I had it. And he came by my desk and he looked. And he kept on walking and he came back by and he looked again. And he said, check that one. And I did. And I changed it. I never forgiven him for what he did that day. And my brother told him so. My brother went to a banquet in Greensboro, and he told him, he said, my sister still holds a lot of anger toward you, and I would have made 100 that morning if he'd just left me alone. And I bet right into it because he said, check that one, and I did, and I changed it. And made me have doubts, you know. And that's trust. You know, you don't trust him. I didn't trust him anymore. And he came here for a banquet one time, and my brother Gene told him every time he'd see him, he said, my sister Juanita still hates you because of what you did to her. And then Christmas came, and I was going up the stairs. No, I was coming down the stairs to go home. I was so glad it was Christmas break. There was 3 boys sitting on the bench. And I know that one was Johnny Bird, but I don't know which John. There were so many Johnny Birds in Dunn, didn't know which Johnny Bird it was. There was another guy there that I didn't remember his name, and then there was Douglas Heath, whose daddy owned the restaurant that I didn't like going to. And I was coming down the stairs, and I was so happy it was over with that for a little while. And they said, one of them, and I don't know which one it was. I always thought it was Doug because I knew him and it sounded like him, but I can't honestly say that it was, but I think it was. He said, Merry Christmas, nigger. And I don't know what happened to me at that time, but it felt like somebody had gutted me. That's the word I would use, and that doesn't sound like a good word, but that's what I felt. It felt like everything in you went out. And I got home and I told Mom and Daddy, I said, I'm not going back to school. I said, I'm not going back to Dunn High School. You can't make me. And I knew better than tell Daddy he couldn't make me, but anyway, he could have. But anyway, I cried and begged him, and I said, please, let me go back and live with the Baggles. I didn't even know if the Baggles would take me back. And sure enough, talked to them, and he said, you can come back and live with us. And I lived with them and graduated from High Point High School. And I didn't have to put up with that anymore, you know. And it was wonderful. I'd come home, had somebody that I thought was very, very special during that time, but his parents would have died if they'd have known that I knew him and he knew me. But I'll tell you what happened. A lot of people did know, because when he graduated from high school that year, they always give the seniors a going away present, and some of them gave him a pot of paint, and on the outside of it, it had war paint printed on it, and that was his gift. And I asked him, I said, what did you do? And he said, I just took it and walked off. And I don't know how he felt. We never did. I'm sure he felt bad. But he was a kind of person that would always come out to the house, and he was told not to come out to the house because somebody would hurt him, you know. We had the reputation out there of killing people. We never killed anybody, you know, and everything. But he was the one that I learned to love Duke, and I'm a Duke diehard. And I loved Duke mainly because he would come on Saturday nights, and we'd get there early, and he would watch the ball games with Dad, and he was a Duke fan, and that's where I loved Duke and everything. But anyway, I went, stayed at the Bagwells for those years, loved it. Came home occasionally, not very often. Found out I didn't have to put up with what I had put up with before. And then when it was time to graduate and go away to college, I went to Wichita, Kansas, and it was a Quaker college, Friends University. And loved it there, learned to smoke and have a little beer with tomato juice in it. all those things in college you shouldn't be doing, but you do, and everything. But I loved it there. And did something very dumb. Was going with this guy from Wichita, Kansas, and we got married. We decided one of us had to stay and work, and the other one went to finish college. And I was the dummy that stayed and worked, and he went to college. And then 3 years later, we had a little boy, and there was a divorce. And I will say this, the best thing out of that was my Christopher. Smart kid, I don't know where he got it from, but he's smart, so good, good manners, anything you'd want in a son. And then along came Jack, my second husband, and he was a blind date. And we both decided when we went on that date that night, there would be one thing we would never do. No marriage. Not going to get married. Never going to marry anybody again, because he would turn out to be like my first one. And kept that promise for 5 years. And he went to visit Mama one day with his smart self. And Martha Jane, as we called her, I went up to visit her, and she said, I'm going to tell you something. She said, he's not like the first one. And she said, you're going to lose a good thing. And she said, he's the best thing that has ever happened to you and Christopher. And she said, and you need to think about it. And you know a man is good when you have a son that's starting kindergarten, and you don't have the money to get his shots, and you don't have the money to buy his clothes, because I was working at the telephone office. Didn't have it. And Mr. Johnson, my boss, came to my desk that afternoon, and he said, Jack called and said he has Christopher with him, and he'll bring him home. And when they got there, he had taken Christopher to Womack. He got a medic to give him his shots, and he'd taken him to the PX and bought him his school clothes. And you don't find a man like that every day. Don't. And he was a good father to Chris. I will say, if it hadn't been for him, Christopher probably would have never gone to college. Would never had the opportunities he had. And he was a good man. And like I've always said, he was the best thing ever happened to us. And when he died 7 years ago, a lot of my world died. And, but he taught me one thing. He said, don't be stupid or silly if something ever happens to me, and you go sharing everything you've got with a man that doesn't have anything. And I listened to him. And there's been some around, but not for me. I'm happy where I'm at, and I'm happy with my kids, my family, And I would like to see, I would love to go sometimes and have a cup of coffee with somebody that's a nice man. But don't want anybody that thinks he's going to come in and live. No. And he's not going to pay rent either, and everything. But that's been my life. And finally came back here with Jack when we got the farm from Daddy. And Jack said it was going to be an investment. Well, it was an investment, all right. As soon as Daddy gave me the property, Jack said, we went to Fayetteville, because we lived in Fayetteville, and he said, I think we should build a home in Dunn. And I said, I don't think so. I don't want to live there. And he said, it's going to be different. He said, because I'm going to be there. And anyway, we built a home in Dunn, built this house, and I've never regretted it. Got a job, worked with the school system that would not let me in, and worked for them for 30 years, and was a secretary for this black principal, Alice Cobb, in Anderson Creek, which is close to Fayetteville, for 19 years. drove a bus at the beginning and worked in the classroom as an assistant at the beginning, and then ended up as the secretary for her. And she was a wonderful boss. And then I worked with another girl that was my boss after Alice retired, and used to laugh about it that we worked in the schools, Sheila and I did, and where they wouldn't let us go to school, and that's sort of different, and nowadays I spend most of my time, I like to be around Mr. Jacobs. I've learned a lot from him, and got a lot more to learn from him too. And I like going out to the center. That's one thing that Jack did. He said, at one time you grow up and you don't have money for vacations and stuff like that. But when the children went off to college, Christopher got a free ride to state, and he got that ride through the Indian Association in Washington, D.C. Well, our Patty went to Wingate, and Wingate is a little church college, and it's sort of gimme, but we made it, and she made it. And I said that both of my kids end up with two things. Christopher has his degree as an architect from state. Patty has her degree from Wingate as a nurse. Well, Christopher found out real quick that he didn't want to build strip malls. And he worked with Bartholomew in Raleigh. And he said, I don't want to build strip malls. He said, I want to build something that's good. Well, anyway, he decided without us knowing that he went to California, went to school, and became a therapist. And that's where he met his wife. Patty met her husband, and she became a teacher. So I said, somebody said they wasted money. I said, no, they didn't. They have two things they can fall back on. And I said, probably not Chris as much as Patty, because Patty, they always need nurses and teachers. I said, Christopher's would probably be a little hard, but he said, I enjoy doing art with Gemma, stuff like that. And he said, I don't think I'll ever want to go back because he loves what he does and everything. And so that's my kids. And they come home. Christopher doesn't come home as quite as often as he'd like to, because, when you start paying 3 tickets, it gets expensive. And but Gemma always tells me, Grandma Nina, I love to travel. So anyway, she's told me that the next place she wants to go to is the Water City. And the Water City, they studied about that in kindergarten, and it's Venice. And I never thought about it being called the Water City, but that's what she calls it, traveling in the boat, and everything. And I told her, I said, well, Grandmother's going to have to save a lot of money to do that. But anyway, that's just about it. I love working at the center. I do. I love working at the center. Jack and I we spent a lot of money at the center. They didn't have a lot of things, and we were taught to give. I meet a lot of people that's gimme, and I don't like that about people. But Daddy always taught us that you had to give, that it didn't matter where you were, church, wherever, you had to give. And when we went out there, the center didn't have a lot. Jack and I paid for the stuff that's in the main room when you go in, like the couch and all that stuff. They didn't have a stove. He bought the stove, stuff like that. And we don't regret it. I don't regret anything that we've ever done out there because it's a good cause. And I would love to see that. I think that center is going to start growing again because there's some good people out there. And I would love to see it grow again. I don't think we will ever be like Clinton, but that's okay. We're not supposed to be like Clinton. Clinton's a lot bigger than we are. And Clinton is a good role model for us, And so that's just about my life.
Great. That's good. No, that provides a lot of points for me to jump off on. The first point is what you just said about the center. What is the center called?
It's called the Harnett County Coharie Indian Association. That's the building. And you know how we got the name? We got the name was provided, but we didn't have a name up. We didn't have the name up. And this was years back. We all decided that we would give $100 for every relative that had died. Well, Jack and I ended up having 5 relatives, so we paid $500. and other people paid $100 for theirs, and that's how we were able to put the name on the building. Now, Clinton has been wonderful to us because they've helped us with so many things like grants, stuff, housing, stuff like that. That is wonderful. Helping people with their rent and fixing their homes, stuff like that. That is just absolutely great because we've got a lot of people here that can't afford it. A lot of people that can't afford to fix their homes. But I love the center. You'll get to see it today, and you will be impressed. You will be impressed.
I'm sure, yeah. So let's get back to at this point now. I'm going to go back and kind of ask some follow-up questions.
Oh yes.
And the first question I wanted to know about, you kind of mentioned.
Could I interrupt you just for 1 minute while we're doing this?
Sure.
I jumped some things. Okay. Can I backtrack a little bit? Okay. When I lived with the Bagwells, I told you they exposed me to a lot of things. Martin Luther King, Abernathy. I'm trying to think of the one that worked with George Bush. What was his name? He was out of Greensboro. Can't remember his name right now, but anyway, he was instrumental in the NAACP there, and when the kids were sitting in the restaurants and everything. Mr. Bagwell told me, he said, we're taking a ride. We're going somewhere this afternoon. And I said, where are we going? And he said, we're going to Greensboro. Well, I had seen Martin Luther King when he did the march. I was in Pennsylvania, I think it was, with the Bagwells. And he said, we're going to Washington. So he did take me to the March on Washington. And it was absolutely, I wish now that I realized then how important it was. I didn't realize all the things that I was seeing and how important they were. I would have been taking photos like crazy or something, little frightened of Martin Luther King because he was so loud and he was so boisterous, and I thought he was going to be big, but he wasn't. Things like that. That was unreal. Went to
wait, how old were you when
I
you went to the march?
15, 16 years old, and did not realize what I was seeing. He took us to Washington, and one of the girls went into Robert F. Kennedy's office, and there he was with his feet up on his table, and she took a photo and everything, and she got a photo of him. Well, I wanted to see John Kennedy. That's who I wanted to see. So I didn't get to see him because something happened and he wasn't there. But she got to see Robert F. Kennedy and never let me forget it and everything. And I said, if I'd just been thinking, But anyway, we went to the march, and Mr. Bagwell came to me and he said, would you like to stand on the stage with Martin Luther King? And I was so afraid. I said, I don't want to be up there. I don't want to be all around all those people. And, a lot of them were dressed with the gear and all that stuff. And I said, no. And the only person I knew there was, I didn't know Martin Luther King, but I knew who he was. I knew Abernathy, and I knew Jesse Jackson. But Jesse was sort of always in the background, and you didn't see too much of him. I don't know what his role was, but I'm sure he had a role with teenagers. But anyway, we were there. Then we, when I was in High Point with the Bagwells, Martin Luther King was making his tours. He came to Greensboro, and he was at Johnson, I think was his name. Ron, his first name was Ron, and I don't remember what his last name was, but he had a house in Greensboro. And Martin Luther King was there that evening when Mr. Bagwell told me we were going on a trip. And he was asleep. He was in the bedroom asleep. There was a lot of people there that evening, a lot of people out of Durham that was in his organization and everything. And I remember that Abernathy was there, and I don't remember the other ones were there. And I know Jesse Jackson was there because they were the ones I could really remember. But anyway, he came out of the bedroom from taking a nap. And to me, Martin Luther King was 6 feet tall. when I'd hear him speak, and I just knew that that loud voice and everything, I just knew he was going to be a big man. And I was so gotten away with when this man came out, and he was so humble, so just meek, and he was Martin Luther King. And I thought, this man is not big and tall like I thought he was going to be. Softest voice you've ever heard. Just really a good man. I think he was a good man. But he was very quiet, very humble, very soft-spoken. You almost had to hold over to hear him when he talked to you. And anyway, he signed one of my a book for me that he wrote. Dumb me, not knowing what I had. This girl at school said, I'd like to read. She was a black girl. She said, I'd like to read the book. And I said, oh, sure. Well, when came time to get the book back, she always didn't bring it, or she didn't do it. But anyway, I never got the book back from her. And I finally decided if the book was that important to her, she could have it. I didn't tell her that, but I decided she could have it. I knew what it meant to me, and I knew it didn't go to her. And I knew that he had put my name in it. I'm sure she took that out, and everything. But that's what it was, And that's why I feel so bad sometimes that I did not realize what I had in front of me. And and there was, I guess people maybe thought that you should know, but I didn't know. I didn't know about when I would go with the Bagwells and they were doing something like for schools and stuff. I just didn't realize how important it was. And I wish now I knew how important it was, because instead of this book, I would have had 1,000 like it. But Mr. Bagwell did this book for me. And he said that he thought one day that to keep it for Chris, my son, and everything. And so I have, and I've been very selfish with this book. I've let a couple of people see it, and then I make sure it comes home, because now I know how important it is and everything. And but he kept it from the word go. There were 70. This right here says 7 Indians. There were 7 of us that sat in, and see, I was thinking there was probably more. And he just went through, and he just kept so many good things. He tells about the arrest at the school and everything, and he's got an article in there about that. And Wade Stewart was the sheriff that did it, but we knew that when he put all of us in 2 cars that we weren't going to jail. I knew that. I knew that probably they were going to take us to the courthouse where Daddy was, and that's what they did. And this, Mr. Greg, that's the soda that I had. That was supposedly the other. Of Huey Paul drinking out of my cup, which was not, And I noticed that was in Raleigh too, and everything. But then it tells about Daddy and Uncle Jim getting arrested, and that 7 of us entered the school. And it's this, guys, I treasure this. And she was just as gorgeous as she is there. That was my sister Dottie. And she could take a camera could take her and make her look. She was just pretty. She was just so pretty. But now let me tell you one thing. My daddy was a house mover. She was a better house mover than my daddy, because he got his leg broke. And he told her that spring, he said, you're going to have, it was winter when Daddy got hurt. Only person that ever got hurt on his job was Daddy. And he told her, he said, you're going to have to take the guys and move the houses. She made more money from the time Daddy got hurt until that spring or summer than Daddy made from the spring to the winter. And he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. But now she was a hustler. Daddy talked. And Daddy would ride off and take a break. Daddy didn't ride off and take a break. She stayed there to make sure they worked, But she was, and Dottie left us, how many years ago? She left back 12 years ago. And one other thing I forgot to tell you, while all of this demonstration was going on, got a lot of letters from a lot of people that called done, a lot of ugly names, and everything. And Walter Cronkite was here, and what was the other two that was on NBC? Ched Brickley and what was his name? Smith. Okay, and but anyway, there was a lot of them that came here. A lot of them spent some time with them. I would love to have, and this girl told me that she might could find it. I would love to have the interview that Walter Cronkite did, and that year at the end of his show, he always said, and that was the way it was, and that's how he ended it with Jean and myself on camera, and that's how he ended it, and that was the way it was. And I would love to see that. I would love to, but somewhere or another, there's got to be an archive of it, but I don't know where it would be.
Yeah, that would be great to see.
Wouldn't it?
It would be, and I think, well, each news station, each of the broadcast, CBS, ABC, they do keep archives, but I don't know how well they keep them.
Yeah.
I don't know where they are.
And
that would be really interesting.
That was
to find.
really, oh gosh, that was back when it first started, and we were still doing the sit-ins then, and Jean and I were, and but I'll never forget that we had a friend that called from South Carolina, and they said, you have to watch Walter Cronkite, and we said, what? And turned it on, and there he was, and he was doing the story, and he ended it with that.
I want to go back to the Martin Luther King story.
Okay.
When he came out and signed your book, did he say anything to you? Do you remember?
Yes, he did.
Do you remember what he said?
Yes, he did. Mr. Bagwell had told him who I was and what we were doing. My cousin Jean wasn't there anymore because I was living with them, and he told me, he said, I know about you, Juanita, and he said, I know what you've been through, and he said, it's things are going to change, he said, because of people like you. And I thought, hopefully it will, but he was so soft. We talked a little bit. He asked me about school. He asked me how the Bagwells were treating me, and because he knew Mr. Bagwell, he asked me how they were treating me, and I told him wonderful, and I loved it there, and that I didn't have to go back to Dunn High School. And that was the gist of it, because then he started mingling, and but he was so, he had an air about him that I don't know how to explain it. He was just very soft, very gentle. I just couldn't believe that he could stand up in front of people with that loud voice and get that voice that loud, and then talk to me that softly. And he stayed around. When we left, he was still there, because I think they were going to a meeting or something in Greensboro, because there was a lawyer that was there in Durham. There was a lawyer. I'm trying to think of his name. I can't remember it, and I should. His son is a lawyer, and his dad was a civil rights leader there in Durham, and the son is sort of taken over, but not as strong as his daddy was. And his, Lord, I want to remember his name, and I can't. McKissick? But
yeah, is it Floyd McKissick?
Yes, that was him. Thank you so much. That was Floyd McKissick. And he was a fine man. Mm-hmm. And it was Ford McKissick was there. The guy that worked for George Bush, and his name was Ron, I want to say Johnson. It was not a name that you would easily, a name you should remember. I should remember. But I know that he was on was it George? What was his name? Do you know? Do you remember?
Well, I was going to ask you, how old were you at the book signing?
Book signing about probably 14, 15. No, about 16, probably 16, because that was getting on up when I was like in the 10th grade or something like that. And
which came first, the march or the book?
March
first.
March came first, and then him. Okay. And as a matter of fact, I don't know how we did it, but it was a camp we had gone to, and Mr. Bagwell used to hold all these, I call them civil rights meetings. He and Davis did, and they took all of us that was at that camp. They took us for the march. And we went on, we took the bus, and I remember thinking, I'll never get through this crowd. And what impressed me, too, was the man standing there in front of Lincoln and that water. That was something that I don't think you could even put in words, you know. And it's too bad. It's too bad that there wasn't somebody else to come along and really take his place, you know. And I will say one thing about our parents and what happened here. We were very unfortunate. When our march was going on and our sit-in, we did not have anyone with an education or the know-how to find somebody to carry on. Ours was just dropped. When we got into school, that was all Daddy and Uncle Jim wanted, was us to go to school, and it was dropped. And I've always said that I regret that we did not have an educated person here that could have picked up the ball, or didn't have somebody like at Clinton or somebody, you know, that could have picked up the ball and kept it going. And but we didn't. The only thing I ever remember going to here in Dunn was a gentleman. I think he was at one of the churches, and he was trying to get something to go here when the blacks couldn't get in. But I don't think he was ever really successful with that either, because no march here was ever successful. And I think it's just because they didn't have someone that knew how to do it or pick up the ball and run with it. And I've always said that if Daddy and Uncle Jim would have had an education, they would have been good. They would have been easy to pick up the ball and run with it. They may have been able to do that anyway, but I don't think that was their goal. Their goal was to get us in school, and once that was accomplished, that was it. And they went back to their jobs, you know.
And I have a question about that goal, because you're not the oldest of your siblings, right?
No, I'm the third. There's three ahead of me.
Okay. Well, hold on. Let's hold on for that. So my question for you on the goals part is, why was it three siblings and then it was your turn to go to why was it okay for them to take the trip and not for you?
I think it was because Daddy and Mother were trying to survive, and our family was sort of split. Like there was the four girls, and we did cotton, tobacco, all that kind of stuff. Well, then my brother came along, and there was a difference. There was a big difference because Daddy then was moving houses and Mama was doing the crops. And because they made a deal, Mama would take the girls and do the crops, Daddy would move houses. And Daddy always promised us when the house moving business got good, we didn't have to do that anymore. But it didn't work out because you know why? We still kept working, and we got older, and then everybody else came along and didn't. Sheila and them did some things like that, but not like we did. It was a different time and different monies and stuff like that. And I don't think my daddy ever thought about Ruth and Shirley and Dottie not going to high school because that's the way it was. And then I think they got to seeing how things were, what should have been, TV, all that kind of stuff. And it worked for them, but it took a while. You know, it was a long, hard road for them. And I'm sure it was a long, hard road for Daddy and Uncle Jim when they didn't have the money to put in to the back end. And I think if it hadn't been for Tally and Taylor, they would have been in a mess because nobody else stepped up and said they would take it. And they didn't see the need, you know. Okay, and also, now, you're talking about the schools that we went to. Our parents paid taxes and everything, but the school that we had, and I'll show you, you passed by the old school. Did you see something called Star Academy when you were coming through? Star Academy was the old Maple Grove School, okay? And the church that's beside of it was the church that we all went to when we were little. my uncle, he said he was our grandfather, but anyway, I won't call his name. But anyway, he gave the land for the church and the school, and he was an Indian man. He was probably, I would say, as far as money wise and land wise, he probably had the most, and he was very generous with what he did. But anyway, although Daddy and them paid taxes, the school teachers did not come from around here, did not come from Dunn. They came out of Clinton and Lumberton, Pembroke. Books, we had books, but we didn't have new books. They were books that Dunn had, and there were 50 names in the front of them, and they were ours. We didn't have a cafeteria when we went over there. You brought your lunch. Later on, they got a cafeteria, but it was much, much later. No music teacher. The music teacher, and I'll never forget his name, he came from Dunn, from Hood Memorial, and his name was Jack Daniels. And he was our music teacher. We took our shots from a nurse that came from out of Dunn. Things like that. We never had anything that was ours. It was always hand-me-downs. And they said, I don't know if this is true or not, and I've never investigated it, but they said that the teachers that were paid, like Miss Nance Ann, she was paid through the Harnett County Schools, but she was not. And I think Uncle Joe was the only one that ever went to a board meeting or teachers meeting or something. They didn't do that. They didn't go. They weren't invited, and everything we had was hand-me-downs, and that was the sad part about it. And when we didn't have, I don't remember ever having like anything other than a music teacher. The other teachers handled it all.
And so that's your elementary school, middle school experience, and then and it's time to go to high school. Mm-hmm. And that you never went on the bus and did the you all okay, go ahead.
I will tell you one thing. Well, sometimes when we had a day off, I don't know when that was, but Uncle Joseph would let us jump on the bus and go down there, and we'd get to see what ECI was like, and it was great. I loved it. Didn't know any better, but they had a wonderful school, I thought, because they loved each other. They had fun. I remember when they had the picnics, and the girls would make the picnic baskets, and the guys would buy them, and then they'd have dinner with them. All that kind of stuff that ECI did that we didn't get to do. They had basketball games that Bray Boy, I was telling you about, coached and everything, or refereed. They did things like that, things that we didn't do. And that's the reason why I thought ECI was so great. Sheila never got that opportunity. My sister Sheila, Jean, or the other ones did, because they didn't get to, they didn't go there. But when a day off, I got to go with my other sisters, and it was a lot of fun, and it was.
Sure. And so, okay, so that you got to see it, and it was a lot of fun. But when it came time to your turn, your dad said, okay, it's time for you to go to Dunn High School, not there, because we don't want you on the bus for that long. It's that time is too precious. Okay, that makes sense. So that first attempt it's different than the second time around after you were in High Point.
Yeah. The first time around was very frightening. You think about, maybe not even 10 children were in there. Daddy and Uncle Jim were not allowed to be around us because Daddy had been arrested and Uncle Jim had been arrested. And Uncle Jim had been arrested for trespassing. They said he was trespassing on Dunn property. I don't remember him doing that, but he might have stepped over the line. But I remember the first day was the most frightening day of my life, one of the most frightening ones, to see small children, and I will say that we were children then, lined up to step across from the sidewalk to the property, and big men in front of you with guns and everything, and you don't know what's going to happen. it never, I guess we were all stupid. I never thought of anybody hurting me. Now, I did it one time later on, but when that was beginning, I didn't, because it frightened me a little bit, but not to think that somebody would literally hurt me. Now, one morning I was getting ready to go, and Daddy, we knew we were going, and we knew what we were going to do. Everybody says, what did your daddy tell you? Daddy didn't have to tell us anything. I knew that I was going to cross that line if there was an opportunity. And I knew that I was going to do it because Daddy said so. And that was just the way it was, you know. And they said, didn't he tell you to do this? No, he didn't. We just knew that the plan was for us to get in that school. And Jean and I got in there. But it was a long time coming, you know, after the cops and everything. When they went away, then it was free for all to go in, and Jean and I were, and Hugh Paul sometimes went in. And as a matter of fact, I will show you something that I found that was just obsolete when I was, here it is. This was probably that was one of the classrooms we were in. And this girl right here is Jean, and that's me back there. Right. And that was the teacher that wiggled his ears.
So you were in this classroom for a little while during your freshman year? No,
I was there protesting.
Oh, okay.
They wouldn't give me a book and wouldn't let me do anything. Okay. And there were 6 kids for high school, and I think there was 8 kids that were in elementary at that time, would have been in elementary at that time. I will tell you one thing. One morning we were getting ready to go, and Mr. Graham Henry was a taxi cab driver, and I think he was something else in town, but I can't remember what he was. He might have owned a drugstore or something, but he would bring Jean and myself lunch when we were protesting because they wouldn't give us food out of the cafeteria. So Daddy had set it up that he would bring us lunch. We'd go out and get it and take it in and eat it, but they would not let us have lunch there. But anyway, one day, I was getting ready that morning, and the phone rang, and this guy said, "You tell your dad, if you go to school this morning, you're going to die." And it scared me so bad because nobody had ever told me I was going to die like that, you know. And I ran and got Daddy. Well, the guy stayed on the phone. He told Daddy too. And Daddy told him, he said, "I'm going to tell you something, sir." He said, "If my kid gets hurt today at that school," he said, "Pembroke will be here and you won't know what hit you." He said, "They will wipe out this town." And he had talked to people from Pembroke. And he said, "Now I'm telling you," he said, "there will be truckloads that'll come in." And he said, "You won't know who they are and what they are." He said, "Somebody will die." And he said, "It won't be only my child, it'll be a lot of white people." And nothing ever happened. I don't know why or if they got the message or what, but they had said that if we went there that day, that one of us would die. And it was just Jean and myself that day. And Daddy told him, he said, and at that time, you all had that catfish that you all had run out of.
Battle of Hayes Pond.
Yeah, and I knew that they knew that had happened, you know. And Daddy had talked to people from Pembroke that had offered to come, and I don't know why, but they just didn't. And I guess they decided that too many people would be really a mess. And we always said that bombing of the bus, and we laugh about it now, but it wasn't funny then. Sheila and I were talking, and we said that was the first terrorist attack there was around, was when Daddy and Uncle Jim bombed the bus. Oh, I don't know if I should have said that or not, but anyway, they did, and I'm going to just be honest about it. Right. But anyway, that was the first. We always say that was the first terrorist attack.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's fine. But I think it's interesting to kind of talk about, you know, you did the sit-ins, and then after that you went to High Point. Mm-hmm. And went to school there and learned a lot of culture there from the Bagwells you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Sure it's all the course was Two Forks and everything like that. How did you mix your culture that you came with, that you grew up with, that your ancestors had, with the culture that the Bagwells had? Because presumably they were not Indian.
I'll tell you what it was. It was very difficult. People really didn't understand, and I don't even know if they probably maybe now, I don't know if they do or not, because I've never really talked about it that much. But people did not understand the life that I had with the Bagwells and the life I had at home. And my siblings will tell you, I'm less and less I went home because Mom and Dad were there. I loved Mom and Dad, but the Bagwells were also like my mom and dad, and I didn't have any friends there because people didn't understand. They didn't understand why. Even my cousin didn't understand. Jean didn't understand why I didn't want to go to Dunn and come to Dunn anymore. But her parents finally moved to High Point, and that made it a big difference. But a lot of people, even now, don't understand why I chose High Point over Dunn. I go out to the center with some people, and I look at them sometimes, and I'll say, why didn't you learn some things when you were with that doctor and his wife in Greensboro? Why? You know, and I know they offered. I'm sure they did. I don't think it was just the Bagwells that just came up with that idea, you know, because they really believed in the whole child. And that, you know, you hear that now in school. Back then they did too, but it was a different way, you know. And I remember my home ec teacher. Her thing to pass her home ec grade was that you had to invite her to dinner, and you had to help prepare the dinner. And I said, Mrs. Bagwell, I cannot do this. She said, yes, you can. She said, we were going to do it. I said, I don't know all of these forks and all these spoons and all this stuff and everything. She said, you do? We've done it enough that you can do it. Well, the lady came. I can't remember her name, but she was a sweet old lady. She sat down, and Mrs. Bagwell had one of those roasts that was sort of juicy and everything. And she ate, and she told Mrs. Bagwell, she said, you're doing the greatest thing I've ever seen. She said, you take a child that's not been exposed to this, and the first thing you start teaching them is which fork, which spoon. And you know what? You won't believe this, but when I married Jack, we would go to the military ball because he was part of the school and part of that class. And I would say to him sometimes, Jack, I might forget which spoon, or he said, you won't. He said, you never forget that. And I love spaghetti. Absolutely love spaghetti. You know, I would not eat spaghetti for a long time until after I met Jack, because I didn't know how to eat it. I would have to cut my spaghetti and eat it. And I knew that people that were watching me knew I didn't know what I was doing. So one night we went to a restaurant, and I said, I want some spaghetti, but I'm not going to get any. And Jack said, why? Because I don't know how to eat it. And this was right after we were married. And he said, Juanita, it would take me 5 minutes to teach you to eat spaghetti. I said, no, it'd take longer. We sat down at the table, and he ordered spaghetti for both of us. And he took that big spoon, and you know, in a restaurant sometimes they don't give you the big spoon to roll it and everything. And he told the lady, he said, I need the spoons and the forks. And she brought them. And in 5 minutes, I was eating spaghetti like a big girl, you know. And but that's Jack also taught me a lot of things. He taught me a lot of things that I didn't know, and I'm so thankful for that, because he sort of just took up from where the Bagwells left off, and kept on, you know. And he would always say, if there's something you don't understand, or you see that you don't understand, he said, watch the other person and watch somebody that really knows what they're doing. And he said, you will learn real quick. And I remember one year he told me, he said, go check and see if those boys are eating. I went over there, and this kid said to me, and he's a teacher now, just came upon his 25th year, and he said, Miss Caldwell, I don't know how to eat. He said, at home we have a spoon or fork. And he said, that's what I eat with. Whatever Mama puts on the table, a spoon or fork, that's what I eat with. He said, I don't know all these knives and all these forks and all this stuff. And I said, Andy, just pick up what you think you should pick up And I said, and you will learn. I said, watch somebody. I said, not the boys at the table with you, because they didn't know either. I said, watch somebody else. The next year, Andy was going around telling all the other ones how to eat, with the forks and everything. And that's the kind of thing you learn, It was learning from other people, And so it was good.
Yeah, sounds good.
It was.
I also read something and saw a copy of a letter that you wrote to Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I will tell you one thing. A lot of people take credit for that now. Like Eleanor Roosevelt wrote their daddy, and Eleanor Roosevelt wrote their mama, or whatever. But it wasn't that. We needed help. And I'm vicious for writing letters. I shouldn't say this in front of Mr. Jacobs, because I'm known to write them and not put my name on them too. But anyway, and I wrote him a couple, but I put my name on them. But anyway, I wrote her, and I figured of all the people, and I had heard so much about her, and she wasn't the actual role model I think that you have in the White House or something. And I always thought that she was a little rough too, she could be. And I thought, if I write her, maybe she'll help us. Didn't think she would, but I thought maybe she would. And sure enough, wrote that letter, sent it off. I think I wrote it in with a pencil, and signed our name to it, Jean and my name to it. And sure enough, she answered. And it was a shock. People didn't believe it until it's in this book. And I have a copy of the letter in the book, and but people just didn't believe that she took the time to do that. And I never met her, never talked to her, but she's always been one of my heroes, because she took the time to listen to a teenager that did not know what they were doing. And that says a lot for her. That's a lot.
I agree. And another person I think that we could mention here, because we've listed some names of some prominent civil rights figures, but I want to make sure that we get one more, and that's Malcolm X.
We were in New York City around Christmas time. New York City, if you've never been to New York City, go Christmas time. It is absolutely gorgeous. I don't know what it's like now. I've not been in a long time. But we were in the village. We stayed in the village because Mr. Bagwell had a friend that had a 2-bedroom apartment, and they were gone for the holidays. So he and Mrs. Bagwell and I went to New York for the Christmas. He said, you have to see New York. So we were all down in the village, and he said, now you're going to see a lot of people that you've never seen before, but you will know them. Had no idea it would be Malcolm X. He came out of a restaurant, and there he was, his biggest day. I didn't say, I stood and just awed him. I didn't say anything to him. I think Mr. Bagwell spoke to him, but I don't remember speaking. I don't remember speaking to him. I just know that he was a man that was that just stood in front of me, and I was just so shocked, And he said, in case you forget, that was Malcolm X. And that was who he was. And he was as big as day. And he had a gang around him that, just the entourage, And I wish now that I would have ran up and said, hey, Malcolm X, I know you, but I didn't, And you don't have that, you're not that brave either when you're in that kind of situation, But that was, he was another one. And, but when you tell people, that people like that, or you've seen them, or like Martin Luther King, they don't believe you. They think, oh, that's in your imagination. And I said, some of the notes from Mr. Bagwell, he mentions things in there that I've kept in there and everything. But I wish I would have known, and I'll say it again and again, how important those people were, and I did not know it. And I did not know what I would think about them later on in life. You just think Malcolm X passing, like one time I wanted to go see a movie when we were in New York that Christmas. and it was Shirley Jones. Shirley, is it Jones that was in Irma la Douce? Do you remember that movie? Little risque, really risque. And I said, Mr. Bagwell, I would really love to see that movie. I said, I think it's going to be good. He said, not that movie you won't see. And it was really, later on in life, I learned about that movie, and it was really risque because she was a stripper and a hooker and all kinds of things in it, you know. And but I thought that, I said, we need to go see that movie. That's Irma la Douce. And he said, not that movie you won't see. And so, but those are the kind of people I let admit a lot of people too that were just down home people. They knew about you. Okay, another man I met, Paul Green. Paul Green is only mentioned a couple of times, once or twice. Mr. Bagwell took me, that was when I was staying with him, he took me to his house. Beautiful home. Never seen a home with so many books on one wall. And they were all leather bound. If I remember correctly, they were all leather bound. And they were on this one, that wall was probably as big as that wall there. And they were all just stacked up and down. This man did a lot, but he didn't do it out where the public knew it. He was one of the ones that found a home for a couple of the kids. I think he gave money for a couple of the kids. I have a plaque in there that his secretary sent me when she retired. She said that it should go somewhere, and she said his secretary, and I think she was his office manager or something, she sent it to me, and she said, we think that you should have this plaque. And I was going to take it up to the museum and put it in the Dunn Museum because I know there's some things up there of Paul Green. They had I became very good friends with his daughter Betsy. She was the youngest, and she was there that day. The other ones I didn't really know, but Betsy I knew because she was about my age. And they had this big thing in the Hilton in Raleigh, and it was it was a school in what were they, the NCAA, and they were giving things to Paul Green, and she and I took a couple of photos together. But people said, you don't know her, and I said, yes, I do too. And I said, Betsy Betsy's older than I am, a little older than I am, but she lives in Connecticut, I think, and she doesn't come to North Carolina very often anymore. And I think she has a sick husband. But I used to get letters from her quite often, and she used to come here when things were being done for her dad. I think her brothers now seem to be the head honchos of everything. And I don't know about her sister, but I know Betsy used to be, but since her husband's sick, she doesn't anymore. And Paul Green, he was a sharp cookie. He was, and he was proud of his heritage. He was. I always thought that there should have been a lot more done for him or about him than was, but there wasn't. I just think he was, he was a great man. I loved his plays and stuff that he did, but you don't hear very many people talk about him anymore. I know that the library in Lillington has a spot for him because I went up there the night that they did that dedication, and Betsy was there. And but Betsy's the only one of his children I really knew real well, and I never met his wife, and everything. And but anyway, there's a highway here in Harnett County named after him. You probably came down it if you came down 421, and everything. The library has a big spot for him. Don't know if there's anything else named after him or not.
Yeah. So. We've talked about a lot of people who are well known, and some maybe should be better known, but are fairly well known still. What about people? Who are people in your life that were mentors to you, but maybe aren't well known?
Mom and Dad, of course. Dad was very firm. The one thing I remember about my dad was right off the bat, he'd say, I can't stand a liar or a thief. And I think all of his kids took that saying after him. And I think I was going to tell you the story about breaking out the big window and accusing my sister Dottie of doing it. When I had cancer, you know what she told me? I was in there in my bedroom, and she came, and she was so good to me. All my family was. And she said, she said, you can't do anything. She said, I ought to jump on that bed and beat the tar out of you for all the lies you told on me all these years. And that's what she said. And it was so funny. It was so funny. And but she did. She said, because she remembered them. Because sometimes she'd get a spanking because I lied. But that day she didn't get a spanking. I got the spanking because Daddy told me, he said, I saw you do it. And I said, no, you didn't, Daddy. I said, it was Dottie. Dottie said, that was a left-handed person. I said, no, it wasn't. It was Dottie. And he tore me up. And he said, I told you there's things I don't like, is a liar and a thief. And you're talking about mentors other than Mom and Dad. There was always my Aunt Margaret. Aunt Margaret was a feisty little thing. She could beat any man at horseshoes and just beat them to a pulp and then just smile about it. She came down here, she and my Aunt Martha. And my Aunt Martha is 98, and she is the only living relative of my dad's that's left. And we went to see her last week, and I love her. I called her yesterday and told her I was thinking about her. And she always says, I love you more when you tell her you love her. Aunt Martha's been around a long time. She's had a good life, but we know that it's just a matter of time, and everything. But anyway, she and Aunt Margaret came down one afternoon, and they just came visiting. And you saw one, you saw the other one. And our Aunt Margaret did not get her license until she was 65 years old. My Uncle Joseph did not let her write a check. She didn't go grocery shopping or anything unless he drove her. So Uncle Joseph died, and Aunt Margaret became a free woman. She wanted to drive, so Sheila, my sister Sheila, got Coach Jim Bennett to teach her how to drive the car. It was the best thing that ever happened, and probably the worst thing that ever happened, because, honey, she ate the road up. After she got that car and got her license, she did not let anything stay under her feet. Well, she and Aunt Martha came down one afternoon, and it was hot, like today, and we were sitting outside, and I said, Aunt Margaret, would you like a pina colada? And, they hadn't heard that name, so their eyes lit up, and I said, I promise you, it's nothing in it. It's virgin. It doesn't have anything in it. I said, I've got the mix, but it doesn't have anything in it. Well, I fixed him one. Aunt Margaret fell in love with it. She loved it. She was playing horseshoes with my sister Sheila's boy. She had fixed them dinner. And after she would fix the boys, they were maybe 8th grade, something like that, 9th grade. She'd play horseshoes with them and beat the tar out of them. Well, that day they said they were playing horseshoes. And Aunt Margaret got tired, and she said, oh, I think I'm just going to quit. She said, it's very hot out here. And she said, I think I'm going to go in and have a pina colada. And the boys just like died because they thought it was whiskey. And they came running home and told Sheila, said, Aunt Margaret's up there drinking whiskey. Said she's having a pina colada. Sheila had to explain to him that the pina colada was just virgin, because I would pick her up a bottle and everything. But they were wonderful ladies. Very gentle ladies. And Aunt Martha, to be 98, she's so mild and mannered, and Aunt Margaret was. But Aunt Margaret was a little more adventurous, a little more feistier than Aunt Margaret was. And Aunt Margaret was the kind of lady that she was jealous. If you did more for Aunt Martha than you did for her, you look out, because she was first. She wanted to be first. Of course, the Bagwells were great mentors. Most of the time, and this is the truth, we lived in a sort of a cocoon. My dad would let us, he would let kids come to our house and spend the night. But we didn't go to anybody else's house, because Daddy thought that sometimes their dad might drink or something like that, and we didn't go to their house and spend the night. But now they could come to our house and stay all they wanted to, but Daddy wouldn't let us go to their house. So therefore, we've always said, if it wasn't for sisters or brothers, we would not have had playmates. And now I think that is a crossover because I find now that the people around here, I try to be sociable, I try to do and everything, but they won't let you in. And I've always said that I think, and it's not true by any means, I think they always thought that my mom and dad had more than their parents. Therefore, they thought we were snooty, and we weren't. Daddy just wouldn't let us associate with them. That was all there was to it. And you couldn't go tell your friend, your daddy's a drunk. Daddy won't let me go to your house, or something like that, But I think they thought that we grew up thinking we were better and snooty. And I think some of them still think that, but it's not true. You won't find a brother or sister of mine that won't share with you. They'll give to you before they'll take from you. And I think our family is just like that, but people don't believe that. And when somebody would say, that table you're sitting at, Juanita and Jack bought, doesn't ring a bell. You owed it. It's like you owe it to them, And I don't feel that way. I think we give out food. We have a food pantry out at the center, and we have people around here that really need it. And they were bringing up eggs from Clinton. I mean, 2.5 dozen eggs in a cart to give to families. That's a lot of eggs and a lot of money. And I got to thinking one day out there when we were doing the food, I said, there's certain people that can't come out here and get the eggs. There's certain people can't come to get the food because they can't drive or they're sick or something. So I made me sort of a list in my head of people that I needed to take eggs to or take food to. And I started doing that. Well, down the road is 2 little old men that I take eggs to, and their wives work. And they are so happy when I show up. They'll say, you're the only person that ever thinks of us about eggs and or take them food or something, because they can't go get it. And I've had a lady that called me, and she said, she said, before you became active out there, she said, nobody ever called me and asked me if I needed food, if I needed eggs, nothing. And she said, you're the only person that's ever called me and brought it to me. And now people say, we need to take so-and-so. Yes, you do. But they don't. And I think it's wrong. I think it's very wrong when we have people that need eggs and need a couple of cans of beans or something, just anything, And I think it's our responsibility to do that. I think that should take away from people feeling that we are snooty, but it doesn't. They still think that. And they don't realize that our daddy worked hard for what he got. And we worked hard. You didn't go to the cotton field and lay on a bale of hay or bale of cotton. Mama, you had a little sack, and Mama was in the middle, and Dottie would be over here and I'd be over here. It didn't matter how much you picked as long as you picked. That was the rule. And we had friends that would go to the cotton field, lay up on a sack and go to sleep. Not Mama and Daddy. You didn't. And that's just the way it was. And so I don't know where that comes from. And I can honestly say I have some mentors, but not very many. Now there's people that I in the world that I think of that I like to say that I would copy my life after them, and everything. Now, my son, I think being a therapist, he's learned the old thing of help. He'll call me sometimes and he'll say, Mama, I won't talk to you this weekend. And I'll say, why? He said, I have a friend that's in trouble, a patient that's in trouble. He never says who he is or anything. He said, but I have to be there. And that's what he does, And he's had some people that have jumped off the bridge and stuff. But he said, you just have to be mindful of what people need. And sometimes you're not, and everything. But
yeah, and to go from that, the question of mentors and that sort of thing, to another question about sort of American Indian culture. Mm-hmm. And that's something you were born into, but you also had to learn some part of it, presumably. Can you tell me how you learned it and how it continues into your life now?
Growing up, it was hard. I know, like Mama did flour bread or the breads that you make and stuff like that. A lot of things you saw on TV that you knew wasn't true. The poor Indian never won anything and everything, but I've learned reading a lot about other like the Cherokee and all has helped a lot, knowing their culture, because around here I don't think we had that much of an Indian culture. Mom and Daddy sort of worked hard and made us work hard, went to church, did all the things that you're supposed to do. But a lot of the Indian culture I've learned since I've become grown. With the Bagwells, I learned a lot of things by going up to Cherokee or places like that. But I know that all of that is a lot of that is show too, And you watch TV and you see a lot of things, and like I said, an Indian never won a war except when they got Custer, and that was about the only thing, But I know I know that's all make believe, And I wish that people would think of Indians as human beings and not just something they see on TV. The Indians are not ignorant by any means. They're a lot smarter than you think they are, and they're what do you call it? They just know things. It just comes natural. They're, what do you call it? Smarts or something like that. Yeah. And where they say other kids know street smart, Indians know how to get along and how to make do. I want to do, and Mr. Greg is going to have to tolerate me. I want to go to his river, and I want to get in a canoe and go down the river, and I'm scared because I've came up with ideas about snakes and all that kind of stuff, and I can't swim. But you know what? I'm gonna go down that river and tie my canoe to Mr. Greg's canoe and let him drag me. And I think that would be great. I want to learn to do that. I want to learn. Now, I'll tell you something I did learn from my husband, shooting a bow and arrow. He had that poor old deer standing out there under the, that's all, he's gone. He's been there since 1978. And I do not have the heart to take him down. He needs to have a home. He needs to be buried. But I cannot do that. Jack would stand upstairs and open the window, and he would practice bow hunting on that deer. And the kid said, Mom, when are you going to get rid of the deer? And I said, I can't. He's part of family. And then when he got so he couldn't pull the bow, he went to the doctor, and the doctor gave him one that you fire and everything. And so I ended up giving those to his brothers. But that poor old deer out there has been through a lot of things, And if you see him, and when Madison used to come here with her little girl, Sophia, Madison would go out there and kiss the deer, and so would Sophia. And I said, that poor thing needs some kissing because he's had a rough life, But people say you should take him down, but I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not
I
going
understand that you can't, and it does look like it's from where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
Looks like it's a tough
and
life.
His antlers are in my golf cart now.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
they
fell off, but I couldn't throw them away. I put them in the golf cart.
Sure.
I said one day I'm gonna get somebody to put some glue on him and see if we can't get him back together.
Yeah, fix it up. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, leaving the needs of the deer aside, what do you think the most pressing needs are for the Indian community in general?
Education, top notch education. Another thing I would like to see our Indian children do, and I went to the high school and got the shock of my life, and this is in Triton High School, not Clinton by any means. I know it's different in Clinton. I went and sat down with our principal, and I said, I want to know, because I know that we probably are missing a lot of money, federal money, because of the way our kids are listed. A lot of our kids are multi. Instead of saying, Mama's white and Daddy's Indian, I'm going to go for Indian, they go for whites. that knocks them completely out of everything. I went to talk to him. He told me this year, and I know he did properly because he called the attendance person, and he said, we had 2 Indians that graduated this year from Triton High School. And Triton High School had a big graduating class because there were 2 boys. They listed as Indians. The rest of them are something else. Don't understand why parents won't do that, but they will not do that. And it's for their child's own good. There is so much out there. Like my son, he was born in Kansas. In Kansas, they have a rule, and I'm sure they have it other places too. No matter what your father was, your child is listed as the father, because at that time they put race on their birth certificates. Christopher told me, he said, Mama, I don't want to be white like my dad. He said, I want to be an Indian. So we changed it. Got lots of kids. He told me, Mr. Jones told me, that this coming year they have 2 Indians graduating, a girl and a boy. I said, well, Mr. Jones, tell me, how many Indians do you have in this school that's listed as Indians? He said 104. Sad. Really sad. And I think education and the race would be one of the things that I really, and the education is so important.
And this question is a follow-up to that question, which is, what do you think is the most pressing need for the Coharie community here?
Here is, in Dunn, would be education, the race. I think they should know more about their people. I don't think you should sit and watch TV and decide that's what an Indian is. And we have so many Indian people that know stories. I read one last night, The 2 Old Wolves, and it was on my Facebook, and I want to get it off. It was just a short story, and I said, if you could read short stories like that to little children, oh, they would love it, because it was just a page. The idea was there was 2 wolves, and the old man said, what do you think about these wolves? And they said, they're dangerous. And they went on to tell everything about them. And he said, well, I want to ask you one thing. He said, which one do you think is going to survive? And the little boy looked at him and he said, the one you feed. And that was the story. Now that's smart, you know. And but we need to do a lot of work with our young kids. Art. A lot of our kids have artistic ability, and they don't even know it. There's a lot of songs, language. I love to hear Clinton when they play the drums. I love it, you know, and our children need to learn that. Our children need to learn the dances. They don't. I think our children here do not really realize how important Indians are. I really don't think they do. I don't think they realize how important they are in society, because a lot white children could learn a lot from them, and all you'd have to do is take them down to Mr. Jacobs River and let them see what's going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And to go into the building where the canoe is. Have you seen that?
No, not that.
You have to see it. Yes. You have to see it. When you walk in there, I'm going to tell you a secret.
Okay.
I say this, and people think I'm crazy. You get a certain feeling when you walk in there. I think you do. I think you get a certain feeling, and it's something I can't describe it to you, but I know it's there, because the first time I went in there with Mr. Jacobs, there was a certain feeling about that room that you feel, and it's nowhere else. And I would go there sometimes just to go in there to feel that, you know. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things that our children could learn. Yeah. I think our parents, they may have gone on to, you know, they're old now and everything, but they can learn a lot of things from the kids too. They can learn a lot of things from the kids. And But I think education, learning about our people, the arts, the crafts, everything. I think it would be just interesting to sit down one afternoon and spend an afternoon with an old Indian like Mr. Lowry that used to be up in Lillington and told the stories. I think he's gone now. And but they said he was an interesting man to talk to and knew all the things. And
That would be great. Hopefully we're capturing some of that here.
yeah. And I hope that you will go to Clinton and see the canoe and the river.
Yeah, it'd be great. Yeah.
But when you go to the river, I'm going to be there too.
Okay, sounds good. Well, at this point, I'm going to see if Curry, you have any questions. Make sure you get up to the mic.
Sure. I just had a question about what did it feel like when you worked in the school where I wasn't allowed to go? What were you actually thinking about when you started work there?
When I started work there, I used to walk down the hall sometimes, and I didn't go to that school when I was in grade school. Sheila went there. My sister Sheila went there. But I used to walk down that hall and wonder how my siblings felt when they walked down that hall. To walk down a hall, for instance, Dunn High School, where I was not wanted, and they had a big sign over the door that says, "Come ye in to learn, go ye out to serve." And I said, that is a sad thing right there, because we were not allowed to do that, you know. But that sign, I think, is still with the elementary school, that was the one thing I noticed the first day we were there, sitting as a stand or sitting, was that sign, and it was over the doorway. And I thought, whoever put that there was a smart person, but whoever kept it there didn't know how to use it, you know. And but I used to walk down and wonder and think it was ironic that I was not allowed to go to school there, but then I had a job there. And I had a very important job when I was secretary, because everybody knows the secretary knows everything, you know, or think they do, you know, and everything. But it was strange to walk down those halls and know that that this was a place that was a no-no to you when you were growing up. And other people that walk down those halls, they just take it for granted, you know, and that's sad. That's really sad.
And you made a comment, made you feel human, and I can't remember what that was in reference to. I didn't know if it was the Bagleys when you were moved there to High Point, or if it was just what you made the comment with. But it just struck me, and I wrote the comment down.
You know, during that time, there was a lot of things that could make you feel human. Just being recognized. I think when a teacher would know that you were smart, and she didn't take it for granted that you were just stupid. You know, you were just somebody that came in off the street or off the boat. You know, I saw so many kids when I was growing up that I thought were very smart, and they never did anything with it, and that was sad. That was sad. They just took it for granted that this is my life and this is what I'm going to do, and I think that's very sad. I think a lot of things can make you feel. I think it makes you feel human when somebody accepts you for the human being that you are and appreciates you. I really do. And people don't say that very much, but I think when somebody really accepts you, like I accept Juanita Caldwell. She may have she may be opinionated, she may talk too much, or she may say too much, but she means what she says, and she'll call you out on it. You know, I think that's the one thing I think of. I don't want to be a yes person. I don't want to be a yes person. I don't want to be a no person all the time, but I don't want to be a yes person all the time either. I think that there's things in life that you need to do, and you stand up for it. And I don't remember what I meant by human, but I can think of a lot of things that would make you feel human. Just like somebody knowing who you are and what you stand for, and just not saying that you're a dumb Indian, you know. And I think through the years, maybe Indians were treated that way. They, you know, people see them on TV and they think that's the life they live. It's not. Come out here and I'll put you to work in my yard and stuff. That's not the life I live, you know, of just taking things for granted and everything. I think a lot of people, even nowadays, think that some of us doesn't live as human beings. You know, they think that we, I think if they saw an Indian eat food, they would say, I knew they eat like that. But the Indians eat like that from India. They eat with their hands, you know. And Christopher told me, I was talking about food, and he said, Mom, he said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, when you eat Indian food, lots of times they eat with their hands. And he said, that's what you do, you know. And but I think if a person that's I want to use the right word here, the person that looks at you and is not a racial person, he accepts you for what you are, would look at your habits and think those are good habits. There's so many, I think we have so many people in this country right now that are so racist that they don't really know what they believe in. It's really sad to me, and it's really scary. Like I told you earlier, my husband said that I was the most racist person he'd ever lived with or been with. And I said, I am not. I said, I'm not racist. He said, yes, you are. He said, tell me what you don't like. I said, I don't like whites, black, or Indians that won't work. He said, racist. You know, we had a good laugh about it, you know. And he said, you know, I shut up. I didn't say anything else, you know. But just pegging everybody like that. He said, that's racist, you know. And he was right. He was right. Be a white man, he was right, you know.
Another question. Obviously, your granddaughter doesn't live here, or your grandchild doesn't live here, lives in California. How are you instilling in them pride in their American Indian heritage? And are you concerned that future generations in your family won't have that connection to your Coharie upbringing?
My son is very proud to be an Indian. He's very proud that his wife is Jewish, and he's very proud that his daughter is Indian and Jewish. He goes to things like, I don't know where, but he said he was in Mexico. They were in Mexico and saw, or New Mexico, and was on where some Indians lived. And he said that it was very sad. He said it's very sad. He said you can go to a lot of places around the country and see where Indians live and see that things are not good. He is very quick, like I was telling them earlier, he's very quick that Gemma knows that she's an Indian. She knows that her name has been changed to my maiden name, and that it's not her father's name, because Christopher changed his name from Calendar to Chance. I've asked him, I said, what are you going to do about that when she gets older? He said, I will sit down and explain to her why I did it. They're very quick to let her know that she is Jewish. They take her to the synagogue, but they also take her to the Christian church. And he said, I want her to know that there's Hanukkah, and then there is a Christian. He said, I want her to know there's whites, there's blacks, there's Indians, Mexicans, or Hispanic. And she has all of that in her school. And he said, I want her to know the difference, and she does. She will tell me real quick that one of her little friends is from, where was she said, Scotland or somewhere or another, and they had Scottish blood in them, and she said, and I think my grandpa Calendar might have had Scottish blood and all that kind of stuff. She knows, and he spends a lot of time. My Christopher I'm really proud of the person that he's become. Now, I can't say that about my stepdaughter because she's just my stepdaughter. You know, she's not Indian, and I don't expect her to. I would expect her to be different. I think she has come a long ways in her thinking, but I would expect Christopher and Jen to really teach Gemma. And I think here people should take their kids out to that center. I think they should learn about beading, dancing, all that kind of stuff. But at a time it was like that. But then I don't know what happened out there because I wasn't around. But something went very wrong out there, and people quit going. And it's, you know, when people quit going somewhere, it's hard to get them back. And like I will say, you were lucky if you have 10 people that go to a meeting out there, and that's sad. And there's so much to be learned and so much to be taught. And I think little children, they should know that their mamas are Indian or daddy's Indian, and they should be taught it. I don't think there's anything wrong. Some people do. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a little boy and showing him how to shoot a bow and arrow, as long as he doesn't, you know, do it to animals or anything. But he takes my old deer out there and shoots at it, you know, and everything. But I think it's very important that the kids learn to do that. And I think it's important that mom and daddy does that. And there's a lot of foods, you know, that we eat. Okay, for instance, when I was an assistant in school, Jack had been turkey hunting in Virginia. And we were doing Thanksgiving with our class, our kindergarten class. And I knew that my teacher had forgotten to get it down because Jack had bought her a tail feather of a turkey. Most of the kids didn't know what it looked like. You know, had no idea what a turkey looked like. And there's turkey farms around here, you know, and everything. Turkey farms in my sister Sheila's yard. Turkeys that go there, you know. Sometimes I think there's something else, but they're usually turkeys. But there's so much around here that you could teach, like corn. Our kids don't know that corn came from where it came from or who gave it first. They don't know things like that, and that's sad. They don't know about. John Smith. They don't. You know, they just don't know about things like that, and I think it's sad because it's not taught. It's not taught in school. They talk about teaching other things, and I said, well, if you can teach about 4th of July or Labor Day, why can't you teach about Indians? You know, when I was in school, I didn't hear anything about Indians. You know what I knew about Indians? That there was a song, and it was called Coharie, I think was the name of the song. And that's all I knew. And he was a wooden Indian standing by the store. You know, that's all we knew. And I think that's a shame because things have changed and we need to change. The people need to change. We not only need to teach Black history, we need to teach Indian history, any kind of history there is, and you don't leave one out. And I'm afraid the way the world's looking right now, there's a lot of us being left out. And I've always said, and I do believe this, I'm not in the school system anymore. Before I left the school system, we are coming a world of brown people. I really believe that. And if you think you're white and you're not going to see brown, you're wrong. You know, I think we are becoming a world of brown people, and I like it. I really do. I think everybody should be brown. You know, I don't see anything wrong with it. You know, I might have some blacks that would say that's not right, but if I say they're brown, they're still included. I have, you know, I don't see, because there's different colors of black. There's different colors of Indian, you know, different colors of white. And I think if everybody is brown, it's a great world, you know?
Yeah. Very good. All right. Gwen, you have any questions?
I have one.
Step up to the mic.
I have one overall question. You were around so many powerhouses, and civil rights movement, and a lot of them were African American. When you went to go stay with the family in High Point, were you exposed to some of those issues around Black liberation? And did you have that exposure before you went to live with them? What did knowing about their struggles do for you as an Indian?
Okay, when I was growing up, my dad, like I told you, my dad was a house mover. He would have blacks and whites working for him. And mother it was always breakfast and lunch and dinner. There was no such thing as a bologna sandwich for dinner. When we had breakfast, you can ask any of my siblings, if they were white man, black man, whatever, they came to in our house and sat at the table and ate with my daddy for breakfast. If you didn't want breakfast, of course they didn't come in. But if they wanted breakfast, they were welcome to come in. And my mother never made a distinction between them and anybody else. When I grew up with the Bagwells, I can't remember anything functional that they did that did not include blacks and whites. There would be people that would come through. There was a lady that walked, and I don't know, I don't remember. I remember she walked everywhere she went, and she'd been many a miles. She would come, and they would offer her to spend the night. She would spend the night. If there was a black man in town doing something, he was offered to come to their home and spend the night, have dinner. I can't ever remember sitting down when there was someone around that wasn't invited to the table, and they were treated just like everybody else. You know, I remember when Mrs. Bagwell used to have it was an open house, and it was tea and cookies, and she would make all the cookies. Ooh, she'd make so many cookies. But anyway, there would be like, after, it would be like from 2 to 4, be open house. And our job was to serve the tea and take around everything and help any way you could. But there was always a room full of mixture of people. It wasn't just white people. It wasn't just black people. It was a mixture. Church was like that. The Quaker church, it was like that. Not as much as her home, but I know when they had parties and stuff, it was usually talking about race, and the people were there. And I can't ever remember them having a party, and it was not about race or people or just people drinking. They didn't drink, it was always tea or something like that, hot tea and everything. But I just can't remember their home ever being without people in it that were different colors. And you didn't make a difference either. And you learn very quick. I'm sure there was kids that they had over the years that had stayed with them. I remember one girl, and she was just appalled that they would be so many blacks in their family or in coming to do something. But that was his work, and that was his work until the day he died. And everybody was just at home, and I can't ever remember it not being at home. I can remember that lady that I was telling you that was walking. She would always come in, and the first thing she'd do is she'd say, Mrs. Bagwell's name was Maud, which she was a nurse from Johns Hopkins. And she would say, Maud, I need a shower so bad. And Mrs. Bagwell would have that tub ready and the towels ready, and she would go in there and get her a shower, and then she'd come back out and she was human, and things like that. But I never can remember them not having a mixture around, and because that was just life. And coming back to Dunn was different. Other than when Mama cooked and stuff, but you didn't see that in Dunn. And I'll tell you something else that used to really bother me is when all of this started years ago. People in town would tell Mr. Bagwell and Mr. Davis when they came, because Mr. Davis was black, Mr. Bagwell was white, but they told them don't go out in that Indian neighborhood. They'll hurt you. They'll kill you. They'll do this. They'll do that. Those people never hurt anybody, but they were scared of us. They were scared of us. And that's the sad part. And I'm sure right now, I don't know if there is, but I'm sure somebody in town would probably tell you, I wouldn't go out there because that's where a bunch of Indians live and they could hurt you, But they're not like that, And because sometimes you can go into a restaurant and think you're going to get hurt too, but I don't think about that anymore, As a matter of fact, I am so glad to see the world turning the way it is. I really am. And people don't like that sometimes when you say that, but I like it. I like it a lot. I think Gemma is going to have a better life. I hope she does. I hope they don't have any more first terrorist bombings or anything like that. But anyway, and I shouldn't say that as funny, but it was funny because after all of this things happened, we say, well, Daddy and Uncle Jim were the first, and we, but anyway.
You good? All right. The last question I have for you is, what are you most proud of?
Most proud of is my family, my children. I'm proud of my race, even though some of them are really wrong, backwards. Some of them don't appreciate the life they could have because there's so much to learn. I'm proud of what my mom and dad did for me. I'm proud of the Bagwells. I'm proud they exposed me to what they exposed me to, because without them, I would have never learned. Without the sit-in, I would have never learned, never met the people I met. And sometimes here, I get sort of sad, maybe, thinking about it. I don't see the people I'd like to see. Like I know the UPS man and the Prime Star man thinks we're crazy. If he comes up, and I don't care what color he is, Sheila, anybody that's here will take him a bottle of water, and that's the way I want my child to be treated. That's the way I want to be treated, and he'll usually say, you're so good to me, but you're supposed to be good to people. And I am. I'm proud of our people. We've got a long ways to go, but we've got people like Mr. Jacobs and people in Clinton that are teaching us, people in High Point, or not High Point, but Chapel Hill, Raleigh. There's a lot of things that we're learning, and I think that's wonderful. And I've learned a lot since I've been here. I don't think as long as I was working, I didn't get out in the community, because you go to work and you come home. And I didn't even go to the grocery store or the bank or anything, because Jack at that time had retired, and he was, I didn't give him a honey-do list, but he would do it. He would go to the cleaners and, places like that. But I missed those people. I missed the people at school, because we had a wide variety of children. And I loved it when all the Hispanics would come in and one was going to school and you'd have 12 show up. I love that, because they'd all come, and I love that. I think that's great, And I miss things like that. Since I'm home now, I miss a lot of things like that I don't get out and see and do. And there's a lot of things you can do, volunteer, but I haven't found my niche yet. I like sleeping late. And I said this morning before you all came, I said, why didn't I tell them later? And my brother Donald said, I'm getting out of here. And so, but he's been a lot of, my brother is in from, he was living in Georgia. He is just came in from Oklahoma. He's been here about a month. And he's been a lot of company. As a matter of fact, guys, I did not know my brother until he came here. And he came the first time and stayed about a month with me. And on his way to Oklahoma, he says he's going to travel some and everything. But, the family being divided, like when he was coming up as a teenager, I was gone. So I didn't know him. And I told him, I said, Donald, it's so strange. I did not know you until you came for a visit. And that's sad. I talked to him and everything, but to really know him, his likes and dislikes and all that kind of stuff, you know. And he's always telling me, he said this morning, I'll have to tell you guys what he said to me. He said, Neat, don't get in trouble. I said, okay. I said, if I do, somebody's going to get me out of it. And, but he did. He said, be careful, don't get in trouble. And I said, well, I've talked to people before. I don't think I'll get in trouble. And if I do, so be it. You know, the truth is the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And I believe that, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to end, but do you have anything you want to add while we have this open?
No, I'm just glad that you came.
Yeah, glad to be
And,
here.
you could always welcome back.
Oh, thank you very much.
If you're just driving through, stop. Okay.
All right.
House is always open.
All right, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Have 2 bedrooms upstairs, nobody uses. And my sister said to me, let me tell you what they said. They said, maybe since Donald's around, you should let him rent a room. I said, nope, not going to rent a room. I said, now he's welcome to come here and stay as long as he wants to, but I'm not renting a room. And I said, that's not even company. That's like stranger, you know. I said, no, I don't want that. No. But the house he could use a family, but I'm not willing to give it to family yet, you know. And I probably won't ever get rid of it. It's got too many memories.
Yeah.
And if you ever find a place and you settle down, just be thankful that you got a lot of memories. Do you have any children?
I do not.
Okay. Who has children? Anybody? Oh, we're going to have to work on you guys.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it off now.
Okay, you can.